Hi guys, tonight we're going to take you on a gentle journey back in time to the castles, villages and candlelit halls of the Middle Ages. This story is all about love and relationships in medieval times, how people met, how they courted, what marriage meant, and the secret ways hearts connected in a world so different from ours. But before you settle in and rest your eyes, maybe you'd like to give this video a like. And if you enjoy this kind of content, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments what time is it where you are and where are you watching from. We'd love to know which part of the world is listening to our stories the most. Let's begin. Imagine a world where the day begins with the sound of church bells, where the air is filled with the scent of wood smoke and fresh bread, and where every path leads to a castle, a village or a quiet field. This is Europe in the Middle Ages, a time of knights and ladies, peasants and kings, bustling markets and silent monasteries. But beneath the surface of battles and politics, there is another story, the story of love. Love in the Middle Ages was not just a feeling, it was a force that shaped lives, families, and even kingdoms. To understand love in this era, we must first understand the world in which it grew. The Middle Ages, stretching roughly from the 5th to the 14th century, was a time of deep faith, strict social order, and constant change. Most people lived in small villages, working the land, while a smaller number lived in towns or castles, serving as craftsmen, merchants, or nobles. Life was hard, but it was also full of moments of beauty and connection. People found joy in music, festivals, and the simple pleasures of daily life, and of course in the bonds they formed with each other. Medieval society was built on a strict hierarchy. At the top were kings and queens, followed by powerful nobles, knights, and church leaders. Below them were merchants, craftsmen, and at the base, the vast majority, peasants and serfs who worked the land. This structure shaped every aspect of life, including love and marriage. Who you could marry, how you met your partner, and even how you expressed affection were all influenced by your place in society. For nobles, marriage was often a matter of politics and property. For peasants, it was more about survival and partnership. But in every class, people dreamed of love, longed for connection, and sometimes risked everything for a chance at happiness. Religion was at the heart of medieval life. The church not only guided people's spiritual lives, but also set the rules for marriage, courtship, and even friendship. Marriage was considered a sacred bond, blessed by God and overseen by the church. Sex outside of marriage was strongly discouraged, and in some places, even punished by law. But the church also celebrated love. Many saints' stories included tales of devotion, sacrifice, and even romantic longing. Valentine's Day, for example, has its roots in medieval Christian traditions. Priests and monks wrote about the virtues of love, the dangers of lust, and the importance of faithfulness. Yet, as we'll see, real life was often more complicated than the rules suggested. For most people, life revolved around the rhythms of the land and the seasons. Work began at sunrise and ended at sunset. Villages were small, and everyone knew each other. Meeting places. The village well, where women gathered to fetch water and share news. The fields, where men and women worked side by side during planting and harvest. The church, the centre of community life, where people met for worship, festivals, and sometimes secret glances. Festivals and fairs. Throughout the year, the calendar was dotted with festivals, religious holidays, harvest celebrations, and market days. These were times of music, dancing, and feasting. Young people could meet, talk, and sometimes even dance together under the watchful eyes of their elders. In the towns, In larger towns, life was busier and more anonymous. Markets bustled with traders and travellers from distant lands. Guilds and workshops brought together apprentices and masters, men and women working and learning side by side. In the castles, for the nobility, life was more formal. Young ladies were often sent to other castles to serve as ladies-in-waiting, learning the ways of court and meeting the sons of other noble families. Tournaments, feasts and hunts were opportunities for young nobles to see and be seen. In a world without phones, dating apps, or even regular mail, how did people find each other? For most, life was local. A peasant might spend their whole life in the same village, seeing the same faces every day. A noble might travel more, but their world was still small, limited to the lands their family owned, the courts they visited, and the rare festivals that brought people together. Village life. In the countryside, young people met at the well, in the fields, or at church. Festivals and market days were special occasions, times when music played, food was shared, and young men and women could talk, laugh, and sometimes even dance together under the watchful eyes of their elders. Noble courts. For the nobility, life was more formal. Young ladies were often sent to other castles to serve as ladies-in-waiting, learning the ways of court and meeting the sons of other noble families. Tournaments, feasts and hunts were opportunities for young nobles to see and be seen. And the role of family. But in both village and castle, families played a huge role. Parents, uncles and even village elders often arranged meetings, hoping to find a good match for their children. Love in the modern sense was not always the first concern. Security, land and alliances mattered just as much.
Courtship in the Middle Ages was a careful dance, full of rules and rituals. A young man might give a girl a ribbon, a flower, or a small carved trinket. If she wore it or kept it, it was a sign of interest. In noble circles, a knight might dedicate his victory in a tournament to a lady, wearing her colours on his sleeve. Music was everywhere. Troubadours and minstrels sang songs of love and longing, sometimes for real couples, sometimes for imaginary ones. A well-chosen poem could win a heart, or at least start a conversation. For some, especially those whose families disapproved, love meant secrecy. Couples might meet in the fields at dusk, or pass notes through friends. A glance across the church, a whispered word at the market could mean everything. But privacy was rare. Young women, especially of noble birth, were almost always watched by mothers, aunts, or servants. Even in the village, gossip travelled fast, and a reputation could be made or broken in a single afternoon. Marriage in the Middle Ages was both a personal and a public affair. By the 12th century, marriage was considered a sacrament, a holy bond blessed by God. Weddings took place in church, with prayers, blessings, and sometimes a mass. But before the church ceremony, there were often other rituals. The hand fasting, where a couple's hands were tied together as a sign of their promise. The banns, where the coming marriage was announced for 3 weeks, giving anyone a chance to object. For nobles, marriage was often arranged by families, sometimes when the bride and groom were still children. A marriage could unite kingdoms, end feuds, or secure land and wealth. For peasants, there was more freedom, but families still had a say. A good match meant security, help in the fields, and healthy children. But not all marriages were arranged. There are many stories, some true, some legendary, of couples who married for love, defying parents or even kings. A medieval wedding was a day of joy, hope, and sometimes anxiety. The couple stood before the priest, holding hands, exchanging vows. Rings were rare, but a simple band of metal or braided grass could serve as a symbol. After the ceremony, there was a feast: bread, cheese, roast meat, and sweet cakes. Music played, people danced, and the whole village or castle joined in the celebration. In some places, the newlyweds were led to their bed by friends and family, with jokes and songs. This was both a blessing and a way to make sure the marriage was real. Not everyone could read or write, but for those who could, letters were precious. Noble lovers sometimes exchanged secret notes, written in Latin or French, full of longing and poetry. The Middle Ages gave us some of the world's greatest love stories. Tristan and Isolde, a tale of forbidden love, potions and tragedy. Lancelot and the Queen, torn between duty and desire. Abelard and Heloise, real lovers whose letters still move readers today. These stories were told and retold, inspiring hope, warning of danger, and reminding everyone that love could be both joy and sorrow. Not all love was dramatic or tragic. Most was quiet, steady, and built on daily acts of care. A husband bringing his wife a fresh loaf of bread. A wife tending his husband's wounds after a long day in the fields. Parents comforting a sick child, or grandparents telling stories by the fire. In a world full of hardship, these small moments of kindness were the true heart of medieval love. Love in the Middle Ages was not easy. Wars, plagues, and famine could separate couples or end lives too soon. Social rules and family expectations could keep lovers apart. Sometimes, love meant sacrifice, giving up comfort, safety, or even freedom for the sake of another. But through it all, people kept hoping, dreaming, and reaching for connection. As we look back on love in the Middle Ages, we see a world both strange and familiar. The rules were different, the dangers greater, but the feelings, the hope, the longing, the joy are the same. Whether in a castle or a cottage, by candlelight or firelight, people have always searched for love.
Let's begin in the heart of the medieval world, the village. Most people in the Middle Ages lived in small rural communities, often no more than a few dozen families. The village was a place where everyone knew each other's names, where secrets were hard to keep, and where daily life brought people together in countless ways. The village well was more than just a place to fetch water. It was a social hub. Women and girls gathered there every morning, sharing news, gossip, and laughter. Young men, tasked with carrying heavy buckets or helping with repairs, often found reasons to linger, hoping for a smile or a word from someone special. In the fields, men and women worked side by side during planting and harvest. The rhythm of the seasons brought everyone together. Spring sowing, when the earth was soft and hope was high. Summer weeding, when the sun was hot and tempers sometimes flared. Autumn harvest, when the whole village joined in to gather the crops before the rains. These were times of hard work, but also of shared jokes, songs, and the chance for glances to turn into conversations. Church was the center of village life, not just for worship, but for socializing. Every Sunday, the whole community gathered, dressed in their best, exchanging greetings and news. After the service, young people might walk together, talk in the churchyard, or even sneak a moment alone behind the stone walls. Market days were rare but special. Villagers from miles around came to buy and sell,
to see new faces, and to enjoy the music, food, and excitement. For many, the market was the only chance to meet someone from outside their own small world. The medieval calendar was filled with festivals, religious holidays, saints' days, harvest feasts, and more. These were the highlights of the year, eagerly awaited by young and old alike. May Day, with its maypole dances and flower crowns, was a celebration of spring and new beginnings. Young men and women danced together, sometimes choosing partners for the day or for life. Midsummer brought bonfires, music, and the chance to stay out late under the stars. Carnival, before Lent, was a time of masks, costumes, and playful mischief. Christmas brought feasting, singing, and the warmth of family and friends. Travelling fairs brought jugglers, musicians, and merchants from distant towns. For a few days, the village was transformed, and the usual rules were relaxed. Young people could mingle more freely, try their luck at games, and perhaps steal a kiss in the shadows of the tents. While village life was simple and direct, the world of the nobility was full of ceremony and subtlety. Young noble women were often sent to other castles to serve as ladies in waiting, learning the arts of conversation, music, and etiquette. Young men might serve as pages or squires, training for knighthood and learning the ways of court. These roles brought young people together in close quarters, but always under the watchful eyes of casherones and elders. Tournaments were grand spectacles, with knights competing for honour and the favour of the ladies. A knight might wear a lady's ribbon on his arm, dedicating his victory to her. Feasts were occasions for music, poetry, and the exchange of glances across candle-lit halls. In the court, every gesture had meaning. A red rose might signal love, a white lily, purity, a blue ribbon, faithfulness. Colours, flowers, and even the way a handkerchief was dropped could send a message. In both village and castle, families played a central role in bringing people together and sometimes keeping them apart. Parents, uncles, and even village elders often arranged meetings, hoping to find a good match for their children. A father might invite a promising young man to dinner, or a mother might praise her daughter's skills to a visiting family. In some places, professional matchmakers helped arrange marriages, especially for those who were shy or whose families were ambitious. Go-betweens, trusted friends or relatives, carried messages, gifts, and sometimes even secret notes. In small villages, everyone had an opinion. A couple's reputation mattered, and gossip could make or break a budding romance. A young man who worked hard, respected his elders, and treated others kindly was more likely to win approval.
In a world without instant messaging or social media, the first glance was everything. A glance across the church, a smile at the well, a shared laugh in the fields. These small moments could spark a lifetime of feeling. Often, the first words were spoken in the company of others. A joke, a compliment, or a question about the weather could be the start of something more. Sometimes, love began with a secret signal, a flower left on a doorstep, a ribbon tied to a tree, a song sung just loud enough for one person to hear. Friends played a crucial role, carrying messages, arranging meetings, and sometimes covering for a couple who wanted a moment alone. Not everyone found love close to home. The Middle Ages was a time of movement. Pilgrims travelling to holy sites, merchants journeying to distant markets, soldiers marching to war. Sometimes a stranger arrived in the village, bringing new stories, new songs, and the possibility of new love. Occasionally, love crossed boundaries of class, faith, or family. A noble might fall for a commoner,
a Christian for a Jew or Muslim, a widow for a young apprentice. These relationships were often risky, but they happened, and sometimes they changed lives. Falling in love in the Middle Ages was not always safe. A careless word or a stolen kiss could lead to scandal. A young woman's reputation was especially fragile, and a rumour could ruin her chances of marriage. Parents and elders had the power to forbid a match, and sometimes did so for reasons of pride, property, or old grudges. Yet despite the risks, people kept hoping. Songs and stories from the time are full of lovers who defied the odds, who waited years for a chance to be together, or who found happiness in the simplest of moments. Let's imagine a day in the life of a young woman named Marjorie, living in a small English village. Marjorie wakes before dawn, helping her mother bake bread and fetch water from the well. At the well, she meets Thomas, a young man from the next farm. They exchange shy smiles, and Thomas offers to carry her bucket. Later, in the fields, they work side by side, talking about the weather, the harvest, and the upcoming festival. Marjorie's mother watches from a distance, approving of Thomas's hard work and gentle manners. At church on Sunday, Marjorie and Thomas sit on opposite sides of the aisle, but their eyes meet during the hymns. After the service, they walk together with friends, laughing and sharing stories. As the festival approaches, Thomas carves a small wooden bird and leaves it on Marjorie's doorstep, a secret token of his affection. Marjorie wears a ribbon in her hair at the festival, a sign that she has noticed. Their courtship is slow, careful, and watched by many eyes, but in every glance, every word, a new story begins. Whether in a village or a castle, in the fields or the halls, the beginnings of love in the Middle Ages were shaped by the world around them, but the feelings were timeless. The thrill of a first glance, the hope of a first word, the joy of a shared secret. These moments remind us that across centuries and continents, the human heart has always searched for connection.
In the Middle Ages, falling in love was rarely a simple matter of saying, "I love you." Words were important, but actions, gifts, and symbols often spoke louder. Courtship was a dance, a careful, sometimes risky, always meaningful exchange of signals, tokens, and traditions. A ribbon, a flower, a carved wooden bird, a simple ring, these were the love letters of the medieval world. A young man might spend hours carving a small trinket, hoping the girl he admired would accept it. If she wore it, tucked it into her sleeve, or tied it in her hair, it was a sign to the whole village that she returned his interest. A red ribbon might signal passion, a blue one faithfulness, a white one purity. In noble courts, a lady's favour, a scarf, a handkerchief, or even a glove could be worn by a knight in a tournament, a public declaration of devotion. The language of flowers was already taking root. A rose for love, rosemary for remembrance, violets for modesty. A bouquet left on a doorstep or a single bloom pressed into a book could carry a message more powerful than words. In castles and courts, love was often sung before it was spoken. Troubadours, poet-musicians from southern France, travelled from hall to hall, composing songs of longing, heartbreak, and hope. Their verses celebrated the beauty of the beloved, the pain of separation, and the joy of secret meetings. A special kind of love, called courtly love, became the fashion among the nobility. It was often idealized, sometimes even forbidden, a knight loving a lady above his station, or a married woman admired from afar. Courtly love was about admiration, service, and the art of longing. It inspired poetry, music, and even the rules of chivalry. For those who could write, a poem or a letter was a precious gift. Noble lovers sometimes exchanged verses in Latin or French, hiding their feelings in clever metaphors and coded language. A single line of poetry could be read and reread, treasured for years. In the court, even the way a lady held her fan or dropped her glove could send a message. A fan held to the heart meant, "I love you." A glove dropped at a knight's feet was an invitation to pick it up and perhaps to begin a conversation. Before church weddings became the norm, couples sometimes pledged themselves to each other in private ceremonies called hand fasting. Their hands were tied together with a ribbon or cord, and they exchanged vows of loyalty and love. This ritual was recognized by the community and sometimes by the church, especially in rural areas. A corner of the churchyard, a quiet spot by the river, the edge of the forest at dusk. Friends and siblings sometimes acted as lookouts, helping to keep the secret safe. Privacy was rare, especially for young women of noble birth. Mothers, aunts, and servants kept a close watch, making sure that meetings were proper and reputations protected. In small communities, everyone noticed everything. A girl who lingered too long at the well, a boy who walked a neighbor home from church, these small acts could become the talk of the village. A single rumor could ruin a girl's chances of marriage or bring shame to a family. For this reason, many couples kept their feelings hidden, sharing only the smallest of signs. Festivals were times when the usual rules were relaxed. On May Day, young people danced around the maypole, sometimes choosing partners for the day or for life. Midsummer brought bonfires, music, and the chance to stay out late under the stars. In some places, playful games were part of courtship. A boy might try to steal a kiss during a dance, or a girl might challenge her suitor to a riddle or a race. These games were both fun and a way to test each other's wit and courage. By the late medieval age, Valentine's Day was becoming a day for lovers. Boys drew girls' names from a hat, becoming Valentines for the day, exchanging gifts and promises. Not all love was approved by families or society. Sometimes love crossed boundaries of class, faith, or even feuding families. A nobleman falling for a peasant girl, a Christian and a Jew meeting in secret. Lovers from rival villages risking everything for a chance to be together. These stories were often dangerous, but they also inspired some of the greatest legends and songs. Secret love could bring joy, but also pain. Couples risked punishment, exile, or worse if discovered, yet the hope of being together, even for a moment, was worth the risk for many. Friends, siblings, and even sympathetic servants played a crucial role in medieval courtship. They carried messages, arranged meetings, and sometimes covered for lovers who needed a moment alone. When a couple finally declared their love, the support of family and neighbors was essential. A wedding was not just a private affair, but a celebration for the whole village or court. Let's imagine a story, a true one, or perhaps just a legend, of two young people in a medieval village. Isabella, the baker's daughter, and Martin, the blacksmith's apprentice, had known each other since childhood. As they grew older, their friendship deepened into something more. But Martin was poor, and Isabella's father hoped to marry her to a wealthier man. So the two lovers met in secret,
leaving messages for each other in the hollow of a willow tree by the river. One spring morning, Martin left a ribbon, dyed blue, the colour of faithfulness, tied to a branch. Isabella found it, smiled, and wore it in her hair at the next festival. Their friends helped them meet, and eventually the village priest, who had once been young himself, spoke to Isabella's father. He reminded him that love, not just money, made a marriage strong. In time, the couple married, and the willow tree became a symbol of their devotion. A place where, for years to come, other lovers left ribbons of their own. The rituals and symbols of medieval courtship may seem strange or old-fashioned, but their meaning is timeless. A gift, no matter how small, says, "I am thinking of you." A song or a poem can speak the words we cannot say. A secret meeting, a shared glance, a whispered promise. These are the moments that make love real. In every age, people have found ways to express their feelings, to take risks for love, and to hope for a future together.
In the Middle Ages, family was everything. It was your safety net, your source of pride, and sometimes your greatest obstacle to love. For most people, especially women, parents had the final say in marriage. A father's approval was essential, and a mother's advice was often the voice of experience. In noble families, marriage was a tool for building alliances, gaining land, or ending feuds. A daughter might be promised to a neighbouring lord's son before she was even old enough to understand what marriage meant. Marriage was rarely just about two people. It was a negotiation between families. Dowries, money, land, livestock, or goods given by the bride's family were a key part of the arrangement. A large dowry could make a girl more desirable, while a poor family might struggle to find a good match for their daughter. For sons, the family hoped for a wife who would bring wealth, connections, or skills to the household. Sometimes a marriage contract was drawn up, listing every detail, what each family would give, what would happen if one partner died, and how property would be divided. Brothers, sisters, uncles, and aunts all had opinions, and sometimes their own interests. A brother might want his sister to marry a friend or ally. An aunt might act as a matchmaker, arranging meetings and smoothing over disputes. In villages or towns, elders and respected community members often helped settle disputes, approve matches, or mediate when families disagreed. Their blessing could make a marriage stronger, or, if withheld, make life difficult for a young couple. In a medieval village or town, privacy was rare. Everyone knew everyone else's business, and the community played a huge role in shaping relationships. A single rumour could make or break a romance. If a girl was seen talking too long with a boy at the well, or if a young man walked a neighbour home from church, tongues would wag. A good reputation was a treasure, and a bad one could ruin a girl's chances of marriage or a boy's standing in the village. In some places, professional matchmakers helped arrange marriages, especially for those who were shy or whose families were ambitious. Trusted friends or relatives often acted as go-betweens, carrying messages, gifts, and sometimes even secret notes. A wedding was not just a private affair, it was a celebration for the whole village or town. Neighbours brought gifts, helped with preparations, and joined in the feast. A couple who had the support of their community could face life's challenges with more confidence. Community events, festivals, fairs, church services were opportunities for young people to meet, for families to show off their children, and for elders to keep an eye on potential matches. Public rituals, like the calling of the banns, announcing a marriage in church for 3 weeks, gave everyone a chance to object or to celebrate. No force shaped medieval love more than the church. From the smallest village chapel to the grandest cathedral, the church was present at every stage of life and love. By the 12th century, marriage was considered a sacrament, a holy bond blessed by God.
The church set the rules for who could marry, when, and how. A priest's blessing was required for a marriage to be considered valid, and weddings usually took place in church, with prayers, blessings, and sometimes a mass. Before a wedding, the banns were read out aloud in church for 3 Sundays, giving anyone a chance to object, or to celebrate. The church had strict rules about who could marry whom. Cousins were often forbidden to marry, as were people of different faiths. A widow or widower might need special permission to remarry. If a marriage was unhappy or contested, the church courts could grant an annulment, but only for serious reasons, like close kinship or lack of consent. Divorce, as we know it today, was almost impossible. The church also offered confession and forgiveness for those who broke the rules. A couple who had a child out of wedlock might be required to do penance, but could still be accepted back into the community. Medieval law was a patchwork of local customs, royal edicts, and church decrees. These rules shaped every aspect of love and marriage. The legal age for marriage varied, but girls as young as 12 and boys as young as 14 could be married with parental consent. In practice, most people married in their late teens or early 20s. The church insisted that both partners must consent to marriage. A forced marriage could be annulled, and a girl who refused to say "I do" could not be married against her will, at least in theory. Marriage contracts often included details about property, inheritance, and what would happen if one partner died. A widow might keep her dowry or be required to return it to her family. Breaking the rules could bring harsh penalties. A couple caught in adultery might face public shaming, fines, or even exile. A man who seduced a woman and refused to marry her could be forced to pay compensation or to wed her, whether he wanted to or not. Despite all these rules, love found a way. Some couples married in secret with only a few witnesses. If the marriage was later discovered, the church might bless it after the fact. In rare cases, lovers ran away together, hoping to find a priest who would marry them before their families could intervene. While arranged marriages were common, love marriages did happen, sometimes with the blessing of families, sometimes in defiance of them. Friends and siblings often helped lovers meet, carried messages, or acted as go-betweens. A trusted friend could make all the difference. Let's imagine a story, a true one, or perhaps just a legend, of love and duty in a medieval town. Eleanor, the daughter of a medieval merchant, fell in love with William, a young craftsman. Her father wanted her to marry a rival merchant's son to unite their businesses. Eleanor's mother, remembering her own youthful dreams, tried to help. The community whispered, some in support, some in disapproval. The priest counselled patience, reminding Eleanor that marriage was a sacred duty. In the end, Eleanor's father relented, moved by his daughter's tears and the support of her friends. The wedding was simple, but the whole town celebrated. A reminder that sometimes love and duty could find common ground. The story of love in the Middle Ages is the story of every age. The hope of finding happiness, the fear of losing family or community, the courage to follow the heart even when the world says no. Through all the rules, rituals, and obstacles, people kept dreaming, hoping, and reaching for connection.
Before the wedding day itself, there were many steps and traditions that led up to the big event. In many parts of medieval Europe, the engagement, called the betrothal or hand-fasting, was almost as important as the wedding itself. This was a formal promise to marry, often made in front of family, friends, and sometimes the local priest. The couple might exchange simple vows, and their hands would be tied together with a ribbon or cord as a symbol of their union. After the betrothal, the church would announce the upcoming marriage for 3 Sundays in a row. This was called the calling of the banns. It gave anyone in the community a chance to object, perhaps because of a secret prior engagement, a forbidden relationship, or a family feud. Families negotiated dowries and wedding gifts. The bride's family might provide money, land, livestock, or household goods. The groom's family might offer a mourning gift, a promise of support and security for the bride. The days before the wedding were busy with preparations. Clothes were washed and mended, food was prepared, and the house was cleaned and decorated. Friends and neighbors helped, turning the work into a celebration. The wedding day itself was a blend of sacred ritual, joyful celebration, and sometimes nervous anticipation. Most weddings took place in the church, often in the morning. The couple stood before the priest, holding hands. They exchanged vows, sometimes in Latin, sometimes in the local language, promising to love, honor, and be faithful to each other. Rings were not always used, but if the family could afford it, a simple band of gold or silver was exchanged. In some places, the couple shared a cup of wine or broke bread together as a sign of unity. The priest blessed the couple, asking God to protect their marriage and grant them children. Sometimes a mass was held and the whole community joined in prayer. After the ceremony, the couple and their guests walked in procession through the village or town, singing songs and receiving congratulations. Children threw flowers and neighbors cheered. The wedding feast was the highlight of the day. Tables were loaded with bread, cheese, roasted meats, pies, and sweet cakes. Ale and wine flowed freely, and musicians played for dancing and singing. For the poor, the feast might be simple, a shared meal in the family home. For the rich, it could last for days with dozens or even hundreds of guests. Weddings were a time for fun and laughter. There were games, riddles, and sometimes playful competitions between the bride's and groom's families. Jugglers, minstrels, and dancers entertained the guests. One of the most unusual medieval wedding customs was the bedding ceremony. After the feast, the newlyweds were led to their bed by friends and family. There were jokes, songs, and sometimes a bit of teasing. The idea was to make sure the marriage was consummated, that is, made real in the eyes of the church and the community. For many couples, this was a moment of embarrassment or anxiety, but it was also a way for the community to bless the marriage and wish the couple happiness. In some places, the priest would bless the bed and the couple would be left alone. In others, the guests might linger, sharing more jokes or even throwing flowers or coins on the bed. After the wedding, the real work of marriage began. In most cases, the bride moved into the groom's home, sometimes with her own family's help, sometimes alone. She brought her dowry, her clothes, and sometimes a few treasured possessions. The new wife was expected to manage the household, cooking, cleaning, spinning, weaving, and caring for children. The husband worked in the fields, the workshop, or the family business. In noble families, the wife might oversee servants, manage estates, and even act as her husband's representative when he was away. For many couples, marriage was the first time they spent much time alone together. They had to learn each other's habits, hopes, and fears. Some couples grew to love each other deeply, sharing joys and sorrows, working side by side, and finding comfort in each other's company. Others saw marriage as a duty, to family, to God, to the community. They worked hard, kept their promises, and hoped for happiness. Like today, couples sometimes argued, faced disappointment, or struggled with jealousy. But the church and the community encouraged forgiveness, patience, and the hope of reconciliation. Let's imagine a wedding in a small medieval village. Anna, the miller's daughter, and Peter, the carpenter's son, have been betrothed for a year. Their families have saved for months to provide a feast.
fresh bread, cheese, a roasted pig, and a special honey cake. The whole village gathers in the church. Anna wears a simple dress with a crown of wildflowers in her hair. Peter stands nervously at the altar, his best friend at his side. The priest blesses their union, and the couple walk through the village hand in hand as neighbours cheer and children throw petals. At the feast, there is music, dancing, and laughter. Anna's mother weeps with joy. Peter's father tells stories of his own wedding day. As night falls, the couple are led to their new home, where a small fire burns and a simple bed awaits. They are alone at last, ready to begin their life together. For nobles, weddings were grand affairs, full of splendour, strategy, and sometimes sorrow. A noble girl might be married off to a man she had never met to secure an alliance or gain land. The wedding could be a political event, attended by lords, ladies, and even kings. Noble weddings featured elaborate feasts, tournaments, and days of celebration. Poets and musicians performed, and the bride's dress might be trimmed with gold or pearls. But behind the splendour, there was often loneliness. A noble woman might be sent far from home, surrounded by strangers, expected to bear children and manage a great household. Some noble couples found love and partnership. Others lived separate lives, bound by duty more than affection. No matter the class, a wedding was a moment of hope, a chance for new beginnings, for families to unite, and for the community to celebrate. The church's blessing was seen as essential, a shield against misfortune and a promise of God's favour. The community's joy was just as important. Neighbours, friends, and even strangers joined in the celebration, sharing food, music, and laughter. The first year of marriage was a time of adjustment. Couples learned to share a home, to manage money, to care for children, and to face life's challenges together. Mothers, aunts, and older women offered advice and support. Fathers and brothers helped with work and protection. Some couples found deep happiness, others struggled. But in every case, marriage was a journey, one that required patience, kindness, and hope. The excitement of the wedding day, the challenges of daily life, the hope for love, partnership, and a future together. Through all the rituals, rules, and traditions, the human heart remained the same, longing for connection, comfort, and joy. In the Middle Ages, society was built on clear and often rigid divisions. At the top were kings and queens, followed by powerful nobles, knights, and church leaders. Below them were merchants, craftsmen, and, at the base, the vast majority, peasants and serfs who worked the land. These divisions shaped every aspect of life, including love. Who you could marry, how you met your partner, and even how you expressed affection were all influenced by your place in society. Nobles lived in castles or manor houses, surrounded by servants, luxury, and strict codes of behavior. Their marriages were often arranged for political or economic reasons, with little room for personal choice. Peasants lived in small villages, working the land from dawn to dusk. Their lives were hard, but they had more freedom to choose their partners, at least within their own class. For nobles, marriage was a contract between families, not just individuals. A noble woman was expected to marry someone of equal or higher status, bringing wealth, land, or alliances to her family. A noble who married a commoner risked inheritance, titles, or even being disowned. A peasant who dared to court a noble risked punishment, ridicule, or worse. A noblewoman's reputation was especially fragile. A rumor of a relationship with a commoner could ruin her chances of a good marriage, or even lead to exile from court. Despite the rules, the boundaries between classes were not always absolute. Nobles sometimes visited villages to oversee their lands, collect rents, or attend festivals. A young lord might notice a beautiful peasant girl at the market, or a lady might be charmed by a clever craftsman. Some peasants worked in castles as servants, cooks, or stable hands. A young maid might catch the eye of a nobleman, or a squire might fall for a kitchen girl. Public celebrations brought people of all classes together. Music, dancing, and the excitement of the fair could break down barriers, at least for a night. Most relationships across class lines had to be kept secret. Lovers met at night, in the fields, or in hidden corners of the castle. Trusted friends or servants sometimes helped arrange meetings, carry messages, or keep watch. If discovered, the consequences could be severe. A noble woman might be sent to a convent, a peasant boy might be whipped or banished, and both families could suffer shame. One of the most famous English ballads tells the story of Lady Eleanor, a noblewoman who fell in love with a miller's son. Despite her family's anger, she ran away with him, choosing love over wealth and status. The ballad ends with the couple living happily in a cottage by the river, a rare happy ending. In France, stories were told of knights who fell for shepherdesses, drawn by their beauty and simplicity. Sometimes the knight would disguise himself as a peasant to win her heart. These tales often ended in tragedy, with the lovers separated by duty or fate. While most stories are legends, there are real cases of nobles marrying commoners. In 14th century England, a nobleman named William de la Pole married Alice Chaucer, the granddaughter of the famous poet Geoffrey Chaucer. Though Alice was not a peasant, she was considered beneath William's rank. Their marriage was controversial, but ultimately accepted. Medieval literature often romanticized love across class lines. Poets wrote of knights who adored shepherdesses, or ladies who longed for the freedom of village life. Many stories set secret meetings in gardens, a symbol of paradise, escape, and forbidden love. Ballads and songs spread these stories far and wide, inspiring hope in listeners who dreamed of love beyond their station. Most couples who crossed class lines faced enormous pressure to end the relationship. Families, friends, and even the church might intervene. In some places, laws forbade marriage between nobles and commoners. A noblewoman who married a peasant could lose her inheritance. A peasant who married a noble might be forced to leave the village. Even if a couple managed to marry, life was often hard. A noble who gave up wealth and privilege for love might struggle to adapt to a simpler life. In rare cases, love triumphed over class. A nobleman who married a commoner might be accepted if he was wealthy or powerful enough. A peasant girl who married a noble might be welcomed if she brought a large dowry or proved her worth. Sometimes the support of friends and neighbors made all the difference. A village that accepted a new couple could help them build a life together, even in the face of disapproval. The church generally supported marriage within the same class, but it also insisted on the consent of both partners. If a couple married in secret, the church might bless the union after the fact, especially if children were involved. In some cases, couples who faced danger or persecution could seek sanctuary in a church, where they were safe from arrest or punishment. Let's imagine a story, a true one, or perhaps just a legend, of love across the divide. Thomas, a young blacksmith, worked in the castle stables. He was strong, clever, and kind, but he knew his place. Lady Margaret, the lord's daughter, was curious and spirited, often escaping her lessons to walk in the gardens. One day, their paths crossed by the old well. A shared smile, a few words about the weather, and something began to grow. Over weeks, they found ways to meet, Thomas bringing fresh horseshoes to the manor, Margaret leaving a ribbon on the garden gate. Their love was a secret known only to a trusted maid and Thomas's best friend. But rumors spread, and soon Margaret's father heard whispers. He forbade her to see Thomas, threatening to send her to a distant convent. Desperate, the lovers turned to the village priest, who listened to their story and promised to help. With the support of friends and a sympathetic priest, they married in secret. For a time they lived in fear, but eventually Margaret's father relented, moved by his daughter's happiness and the respect Thomas earned in the village. Their story became a legend, a reminder that sometimes love could bridge even the widest divide. The story of love across class lines is the story of hope, courage, and the belief that the heart can overcome any obstacle. These dreams are as old as time and as real today as they were in the Middle Ages.
In the Middle Ages, love was powerful, but it was also dangerous. Not every romance was blessed by family, community, or church. Some loves were secret, some were scandalous, and some were simply impossible. Crossing class lines, noble and peasant. Crossing faith, Christian and Jew, Christian and Muslim. Adultery, love outside of marriage. Breaking vows, monks, nuns, or priests falling in love. Defying family or feudal obligations. The reasons were many, but the risks were always real. Lovers met in the shadows, behind church walls, in the woods at dusk, or in the corners of crowded markets. Trusted friends, servants, or even sympathetic priests sometimes helped arrange these meetings, carrying messages or keeping watch. Letters and poems were written in code, using metaphors, symbols, or even invisible ink made from lemon juice. A single flower, a ribbon, or a song could carry a secret message. Every secret love story needed a confidant, a loyal friend, a clever maid, or a wise priest who could be trusted with the truth. One of the most famous love stories of the Middle Ages, Tristan and Isolde, were doomed from the start. Tristan was a knight sent to bring Isolde to marry his uncle, King Mark. But On the journey, they accidentally drank a love potion and fell hopelessly in love. Their affair was passionate, secret, and ultimately tragic, ending in death, but immortalized in song and legend. In the tales of King Arthur, Sir Lancelot and Queen Guinevere's love was both legendary and forbidden. Their affair brought joy and pain, loyalty and betrayal, and ultimately contributed to the fall of Camelot. Their story was retold in countless poems, songs, and paintings, a warning and a celebration of love's power. A real-life story from 12th century France, Abelard was a famous philosopher and teacher, Heloise his brilliant student. Their secret love led to a secret marriage, a child, and, when discovered, tragedy. Abelard was attacked and forced to become a monk. Heloise became a nun. Their letters, full of longing and wisdom, are still read today. In a world where reputation was everything, jealousy could be deadly. A jealous husband or wife might accuse their partner of infidelity, leading to public shame, divorce, or even violence. Betrayal was not just a personal wound, it could destroy families, alliances, and even kingdoms. A noblewoman caught in an affair might be sent to a convent. A knight might lose his lands or his life. The punishments for adultery or forbidden love were harsh. Public shaming, parading through the streets, wearing special clothes, fines or loss of property, exile from the community, in rare cases, execution, especially for noble women or in cases of treason. The church preached forgiveness, but also demanded penance. A couple caught in sin might be required to confess, do public penance, or make a pilgrimage. Lovers used every tool at their disposal to communicate. A handkerchief dropped in a certain place, a flower left on a windowsill, or a song sung at a festival with hidden meaning. Poets and troubadours wrote verses that could be read in many ways. A poem about a rose in the garden might be a secret message. To a lover. Small gifts, rings, carved tokens, or embroidered scarves were exchanged in secret, hidden in books or under pillows. Women in the Middle Ages had less freedom than men, but they were not powerless. Many women took great risks for love, arranging secret meetings, writing letters, or even running away from home. The consequences for women were often harsher than for men. A woman caught in an affair could lose her reputation, her family, or her life. Despite the risks, many women chose love over safety. Their stories, real and legendary, were told and retold, inspiring others to hope, to dream, and sometimes to rebel. The church was both a judge and a refuge. Lovers might confess their sins to a priest, seeking forgiveness and advice. In some cases, couples who faced danger or persecution could seek sanctuary in a church where they were safe from arrest or punishment. The church preached that no sin was beyond forgiveness. A couple who repented could be welcomed back into the community, though scars might remain. Kings and queens were not immune to forbidden love. Royal courts were full of intrigue, jealousy, and secret affairs. A queen who took a lover risked everything: her crown, her life, her children's future. Some queens were celebrated for their passion. Others were destroyed by scandal. Kings often had mistresses, sometimes openly, sometimes in secret. These relationships could bring power and privilege, but also danger and rivalry. Not every story ended in tragedy. Some couples confessed, did penance, and were forgiven,
by the church, by their families, and by each other. Even in the darkest moments, love could bring hope, healing, and the chance to start again. Legends tell of lovers who, after years of separation or suffering, were reunited, older, wiser, and still in love. Let us imagine a story, a true one, or perhaps just a legend, of forbidden love in a medieval town. Isabella, the daughter of a wealthy merchant, fell in love with Pierre, a young apprentice. Their families were rivals and the church forbade their union. But their love was strong, and with the help of friends, they met in secret, by the river at dusk, in the shadows of the market, in the quiet of the church. They exchanged letters, gifts, and promises. When their secret was discovered, Isabella was sent to a convent, and Pierre was forced to leave the town. Years passed. Isabella prayed for forgiveness. Pierre worked and waited. At last, the priest who had once condemned them spoke to their families, urging mercy. In time, the lovers were reunited, not as young and reckless as before, but still full of hope. Their story became a lesson that love, though risky, could survive even the harshest trials. The story of forbidden love is the story of every age. The thrill of secret meetings, the pain of jealousy and betrayal, the hope of forgiveness and redemption. Through all the rules, risks, and punishments, people kept dreaming, hoping, and reaching for connection.
In the 12th century, a new idea began to spread through the courts of France and beyond. A way of loving that was both passionate and pure, daring and disciplined. This was the age of courtly love. Courtly love was a set of ideals and rituals that celebrated the longing of a knight for a lady, often a lady who was married, noble, and far above his station. It was love as a quest, a challenge, a test of character. The knight served his lady with loyalty and devotion. He wrote her poems, sang her songs, and performed brave deeds in her honor. The lady, in turn, inspired him to be better, braver, and more noble. Courtly love was often secret, sometimes forbidden, and always surrounded by rules. It was less about physical passion and more about admiration, longing, and the art of desire. The troubadours were the rock stars of the Middle Ages, poet-musicians who traveled from castle to castle, singing of love, loss, and hope. Most came from southern France, but their influence spread across Europe. They wrote in the language of the people, not just Latin, making their songs accessible to all. The pain of unrequited love, the joy of secret meetings, the sorrow of separation, the hope of reunion. Their poetry was full of metaphors, comparing love to a hunt, a storm, a flower, or a fire that could not be quenched. Bernard de Ventardon, known for his passionate, melancholy songs. Eleanor of Aquitaine, a powerful queen and patron of poets who inspired and protected many troubadours. Geoffrey Rudel, famous for his love from afar, falling in love with a woman he had never met. The medieval age gave us some of the world's most enduring love stories, tales that were told and retold, painted on walls and sung in halls. A story of forbidden love, magic potions, and tragic fate. Tristan, a knight, and Isolde, an Irish princess, fall in love after drinking a love potion meant for another. Their passion defies kings and kingdoms, but ends in sorrow. Their story became a symbol of love's power and its dangers. In the legends of King Arthur, Sir Lancelot's love for Queen Guinevere is both his greatest strength and his downfall. Their affair brings joy and pain, loyalty and betrayal, and ultimately the fall of Camelot. Poets, painters, and musicians have retold their story for centuries. A real-life story of a philosopher and his brilliant student whose secret love led to tragedy and separation. Their letters, full of longing and wisdom, are still read today. A famous French poem that uses the quest for a rose as a metaphor for the pursuit of love. It explores desire, virtue, and the challenges of winning a beloved's heart. Medieval lovers used flowers to send messages. A red rose for love, a white lily for purity, violets for modesty, rosemary for remembrance. A bouquet could say what words could not. Colors had meaning too. A blue ribbon for faithfulness, a green one for hope, a gold ring for eternal love. Lovers exchanged tokens, rings, scarves, carved wooden birds, or embroidered handkerchiefs, each with its own secret meaning. Knights sometimes painted symbols of love on their shields, a heart, a flower, or the initials of their beloved. Medieval artists filled books and walls with images of lovers, knights kneeling before ladies, couples walking in gardens, or secret meetings under the moon. Castles were decorated with tapestries showing scenes of courtship, marriage, and the joys and sorrows of love. The famous Lady and the Unicorn tapestries, for example, are full of hidden meanings about desire, virtue, and the senses. Churches sometimes included images of biblical lovers, Jacob and Rachel, Ruth and Boaz, or even local legends, reminding worshippers that love was both human and divine. Folk songs told stories of love found and lost, of brave kites and clever maidens, of heartbreak and hope. These songs were sung in taverns, at festivals, and around the fire. Music brought people together, helped them remember, and gave them hope. A song could comfort a lonely heart, celebrate a wedding, or mourn a lost love. The ideals of courtly love shaped the code of chivalry, the rules that knights were supposed to follow. A true knight was loyal, brave, generous, and devoted to his lady. Love was seen as both a virtue and a temptation. It could inspire greatness, but also lead to downfall. Women were often the inspiration for poetry and song, but they were also creators, writing poems, composing music, and even painting. The church celebrated some kinds of love, marriage, devotion, charity, but warned against others. Art and literature sometimes walked a fine line, using allegory and metaphor to explore desire without breaking the rules. Stories of saints often included tales of love, sometimes romantic, sometimes spiritual. Saint Valentine, for example, became a symbol of love and devotion. Let's imagine a story, a true one, or perhaps just a legend, of love and art in a medieval court. Julien, a young troubadour, arrives at the castle of Lady Isabel. He sings of distant lands, brave knights, and the beauty of the lady who inspires him. Isabel listens from her window, her heart stirred by the music. She sends him a blue ribbon, a sign of hope and faithfulness. Julien writes her a poem, hiding her name in the first letters of each line. They exchange glances at the feast, share a secret smile, and dream of a love that might never be spoken aloud. Their story is told in song, painted on the walls, and remembered long after they are gone. The stories, songs, and art of the Middle Ages shaped the way people thought about love for centuries. They taught that love could be noble, inspiring, and even tragic. They showed that longing, hope, and heartbreak were part of the human experience. They gave us the language, the symbols, and the dreams that still fill our books, our movies, and our hearts today. Across time and place, love and art have always gone hand in hand. A poem can say what the heart cannot. A song can comfort, inspire, or heal. A painting or a tapestry can keep a memory alive for generations. In every age, people have used art to express the deepest parts of themselves, to reach out, to connect, and to hope.
For most people in the Middle Ages, home was a simple place, a cottage of wood and thatch, a small stone house, or a room above a shop. Noble families might live in larger manor houses or castles, but even there, daily life was shaped by routine, work, and the need for cooperation. The hearth was the heart of the home. Here, meals were cooked, stories were told, and families gathered at the end of a long day. A simple meal, bread, cheese, soup, and sometimes meat, was shared by all, with the best pieces saved for guests or elders. Beds were often shared by couples, children, and sometimes even servants or guests. Privacy was rare, but warmth and comfort were found in closeness. Many families kept a small garden, growing herbs, vegetables, and flowers. Tending the garden was a shared task, and the first green shoots of spring were a sign of hope and renewal. Marriage in the Middle Ages was a partnership built on necessity. Men and women worked side by side, he in the fields, she at the loom or the oven, both caring for animals, children, and the home. In towns, couples often ran businesses together, a bakery, a blacksmith's shop, a tavern. Wives kept the accounts, managed supplies, and sometimes even took over the trade if their husbands were away or ill. Children helped from a young age, gathering firewood, feeding animals, learning the skills they would need as adults. Grandparents, aunts and uncles all played a role, making the medieval family a true community. The birth of a child was a moment of joy and hope. Neighbours brought gifts, the priest offered blessings, and godparents were chosen to help guide the child's spiritual life. Childhood was short. By the age of 7 or 8, children were expected to help with work, learn a trade or serve as apprentices. But there was also time for play, games with sticks and stones, songs and stories by the fire. Many children did not survive to adulthood. Illness, accidents, and hunger were constant threats. Families mourned their losses, but also found strength in each other and in their faith. Not all love was grand or dramatic. Most was found in the small moments. A husband bringing his wife a flower from the field. A wife mending his husband's shirt by candlelight. Parents comforting a sick child or telling stories to help them sleep. Couples faced hardship together, bad harvests, illness, the loss of a loved one. But they also shared laughter, music, and the joy of a good meal or a sunny day. Love grew in the habits of daily life, working together, sharing burdens, and finding comfort in each other's presence. The medieval calendar was full of holy days, Christmas, Easter, saints' days, each marked with special meals, music, and rituals. May Day, harvest festivals, and weddings brought the whole community together. Couples danced, children played, and everyone shared in the bounty of the season. The church was present at every stage of life, baptisms, weddings, funerals, and the weekly rhythm of Sunday services. Faith was a source of comfort, hope, and connection. Many families faced the fear of war. Husbands and sons called to fight, villages threatened by raids or armies on the move. Letters, prayers, and tokens of love were sent with those that left, and the hope of reunion kept many hearts strong. Epidemics like the Black Death brought fear and loss, but they also brought people together, caring for the sick, comforting the dying, and finding hope in survival. Travel was slow and dangerous. A merchant might be gone for months, a pilgrim for years. Love was kept alive through letters, gifts, and the memory of shared moments. Let's imagine a day in the life of a medieval couple, Eleanor and Robert, living in a small English village. Eleanor rises before dawn, stirs the fire, and prepares bread for baking. Robert checks the animals, then heads to the fields with his neighbours. They share a simple meal, bread, cheese, and apples, sitting together on a bench outside their cottage. They talk about the weather, the crops, and their children's future. Eleanor weaves at her loom, while Robert repairs a fence. Their children play nearby, watched by their grandmother. The family gathers for supper, then listens as Robert tells a story by the fire. Eleanor mends clothes, the children drift asleep, and the couple share a quiet moment before bed. Love in the Middle Ages was not always easy. It required patience, forgiveness, and the willingness to face hardship together. Couples learned to rely on each other, to share burdens, and to celebrate small victories. Over years and decades, love grew deeper, rooted in shared memories, struggles, and dreams. The story of daily life and love in the Middle Ages is the story of every age. The hope of a new beginning, the comfort of a familiar face, the strength found in partnership and community. Through all the changes of history, the human heart has always searched for connection, comfort, and joy.
Love in the Middle Ages, like any age, was not always gentle or easy. For every story of devotion and partnership, there were tales of jealousy, betrayal, heartbreak, and the struggle to forgive. The human heart, after all, is a place of both light and shadow. In a world where reputation was everything, and where the rules of society and faith were strict, the consequences of jealousy and betrayal could be severe, not just for lovers, but for families and entire communities. Jealousy was a powerful force in medieval life. It could arise from real or imagined threats, a rival's glance, a secret letter, or a rumor whispered in the market. Fear of losing a beloved to another, anxiety about reputation and honor, the desire to protect family, property, or social standing. A husband might become suspicious if his wife spent too much time with a neighbor, or if she received gifts or attention from another man. A wife might worry if her husband lingered at the tavern, or if he was seen talking to a young widow. Unmarried couples, too, faced jealousy, especially when courtship was public and many suitors competed for the same hand. In small villages and crowded towns, gossip was a constant threat. A single rumor could spark jealousy, leading to arguments, broken engagements, or even violence. Betrayal was one of the deepest wounds a person could suffer in the Middle Ages. Adultery, love or desire outside of marriage, was considered a grave sin by the church and a serious crime by the community. The consequences could be severe, especially for women. A woman caught in adultery might be shamed, exiled, or even executed in rare cases. A man might face fines, loss of property, or public humiliation. Breaking a betrothal or engagement was also seen as a betrayal. Families might feud, and the person who broke the promise could be shunned or sued for damages. Betrayal was not limited to romance. A friend who revealed a secret, a servant who carried tales, or a family member who sided with a rival could cause lasting pain. In the courts of kings and nobles, jealousy and betrayal were often magnified by power, ambition, and intrigue. Kings and queens were not immune to the storms of the heart. Royal courts were full of secret affairs, jealous rivals, and dramatic confrontations. A queen's lover might be exiled or executed if discovered. A king's mistress could become a target for jealous courtiers or a pawn in political games. The affair between King Henry II of England and Rosamund Clifford, known as Fair Rosamund, ended in tragedy and legend. The love triangle of King Arthur, Queen Guinevere, and Sir Lancelot became a symbol of both passion and betrayal. For nobles, the stakes were high. A scandal could destroy a family's reputation, cost them land or titles, or even lead to war. The Church and the law took betrayal seriously. The Church taught that all sins could be forgiven, but only after true repentance and penance. A person who confessed adultery or betrayal might be required to fast or pray for a set period, make a pilgrimage to a holy site, or perform acts of charity or service. Sometimes penance was public. A woman caught in adultery might be forced to stand in the churchyard in a special garment, asking for forgiveness from the community. Secular law could be harsh. A husband could sue his wife's lover for damages. A woman who broke a betrothal might lose her dowry or face exile. Despite the pain of jealousy and betrayal, the Middle Ages also offered paths to forgiveness and healing. Priests and confessors often acted as mediators, helping couples reconcile, encouraging forgiveness, and reminding people of the power of mercy. Families and neighbors sometimes intervene to help couples heal, offering advice, support, or simply a listening ear. Time could heal many wounds. Couples who survived a crisis often found their love deepened by the experience. Let's imagine a story, a true one, or perhaps just a legend, of jealousy, betrayal, and forgiveness in a medieval village. Agnes and John had been married for 10 years. They worked hard, raised children, and shared the joys and sorrows of daily life. One summer, a new family moved to the village. The wife, Marjorie, was young and beautiful, and John found himself drawn to her laughter and stories. Agnes noticed the change, John's absences, his distracted gaze, the way he smiled at Marjorie in church. Rumours spread, and soon the whole village was whispering. Agnes confronted John, and he confessed his feelings. He had not acted on them, but the trust between them was broken. Agnes turned to the priest, who listened to her pain and counselled patience. John, ashamed, made a public apology and promised to win back Agnes's trust. Over time, with the help of family and friends, Agnes and John rebuilt their marriage, learning to forgive, to communicate, and to find joy in each other once more. Their story became a lesson in the village, that love could survive even the storms of the heart, if both partners were willing to work and hope. Women in the Middle Ages faced special challenges when it came to jealousy and betrayal. A woman's reputation was her most valuable possession. A single accusation could ruin her life, even if it was false. Women relied on each other, mothers, sisters, friends, for support, advice, and protection. Many women found ways to survive and even thrive after betrayal, starting new lives, building businesses, or becoming respected members of their communities. The story of jealousy and betrayal is as old as love itself. The fear of losing someone you love, the pain of broken trust, the hope of forgiveness and a new beginning. In every age, people have faced these storms, sometimes with anger, sometimes with grace, always with the hope that love will endure. that love is both fragile and strong, that forgiveness is possible but not always easy, that community, faith, and time can help heal even the deepest wounds.
The Middle Ages were an age of uncertainty. For many, life was shaped not only by the rhythms of the seasons, but by the sudden storms of war, invasion, and violence. Castles were built for defense, not comfort. Villages could be burned in a night. And yet, even in the darkest times, love endured. When a king or lord called his men to war, families were torn apart. Husbands, sons, and brothers marched away, sometimes for months, sometimes for years, sometimes never to return. Wives and children were left behind, waiting, hoping, and praying for news. The night before a campaign, a couple might share a quiet meal, a whispered promise, a token exchanged, a lock of hair, a ring, a ribbon. Tears were shed, but hope was never lost. For those left behind, every day was a test of patience and faith. Women managed farms, businesses, and households, often with the help of neighbors and kin. Children grew up quickly, learning to help and to comfort their mothers. For those who could read and write, letters became a precious link. A knight might send a message from the battlefield, describing the fighting, the longing for home, and the hope of reunion. A wife might write of the harvest, the children's laughter, and her prayers for his safety. When words were not possible, tokens spoke instead. A scarf, a carved brooch, a pressed flower. These small objects carried the weight of memory and hope. For many, stories and songs kept love alive. A mother would tell her children tales of their father's bravery, or a wife would sing the song he loved best, keeping his memory close. In the 14th century, the Black Death swept across Europe, killing millions. No family was untouched. Fear and grief were everywhere, but so was the need for comfort, for connection, for love. When plague struck, many fled, but many stayed. Wives nursed husbands, parents cared for children, friends risked their lives to help neighbors. Acts of love and sacrifice shone brightest in the darkest hours. Many lost loved ones, but found strength in faith, in community, and in the hope of reunion, if not in this life, then in the next. When war ended or plague receded, the joy of reunion was profound. A husband returned to find his children grown, his wife changed by hardship and hope. A wife welcomed her beloved home, grateful for every day together. Reunion was not always easy. Time apart could change people. Old wounds might linger, new habits might clash. But for many, love was renewed, deeper, wiser, and more grateful for the gift of togetherness. Let's imagine a story, a true one, or perhaps just a legend, of love in a time of war. Margaret and William were married in the spring, just before William was called to fight in a distant campaign. He left her a ring, promising to return. Margaret waited, tending the farm, raising their son, and writing letters she was never sure would reach him. Months passed. News was scarce. Rumors of defeat, of victory, of death and survival swept through the village. At last, a letter arrived, tattered, stained, but full of hope. William was alive, dreaming of home, longing for Margaret's embrace. When he finally returned, they wept together, grateful for every moment, every breath, every ordinary day. Their story was told for generations, a reminder that love could survive even the longest separation. In times of war and plague, faith was a source of comfort and hope. Couples prayed for each other's safety, made vows to saints, and gave thanks for every blessing. Some made pilgrimage to holy sites, seeking healing or forgiveness. Others gave alms, built chapels, or performed acts of charity in the name of love. For those who lost loved ones, faith offered the hope of reunion in the next life, a comfort in a world full of loss. No one survived alone. Neighbors shared food, cared for children, and helped rebuild after disaster. Women were often the backbone of the community, managing homes, leading prayers, and keeping hope alive. Even in hard times, festivals continued, sometimes in defiance of fear, sometimes as a way to remember and honor the lost. The story of love in times of war and plague is the story of every age. The pain of parting, the hope of reunion, the strength found in faith, family, and community. Through every crisis, the human heart has searched for connection, comfort, and the promise of a better tomorrow. Let's imagine a day in the life of a medieval woman waiting for her beloved's return. At dawn, she rises, tends the fire, and prepares food for her children. She works in the fields, repairs the roof, and listens for news from the road. At night, she sits by the window, holding the ring she left her, whispering prayers for his safety. She tells her children stories of their father's courage, sings the song he loved best, and keeps his memory close. Even in the darkest times, love endured. In whispered prayers and silent tears, in letters sent across battlefields, in the arms of a returning husband, or the memory of a lost beloved. The Middle Ages remind us that love is not just a feeling, but a force, a source of strength, hope, and survival. On a quiet night in the Middle Ages, the sound of church bells drifted across the fields, mingling with the wind and the distant calls of nightbirds. In this world, love was not only a matter of the heart between two people, it was also a longing of the soul, a search for meaning, a journey toward the divine. Tonight, we step into the world of sacred love, the faith, devotion, and spiritual longing that shaped the lives of countless men and women in medieval Europe. In monasteries and convents, in the hearts of peasants and nobles alike, there was a kind of love that reached beyond the human, a love for God, for Christ, for the saints. Monks and nuns left behind the world of marriage and family, choosing instead a life of prayer, contemplation, and service. But their devotion was not cold or distant. It was often described in the language of longing, desire, and even romance. Sister Clara, in a small convent on the edge of a forest, wrote in her journal each night, "Lord, you are the light in my darkness, the warmth in my loneliness. I long for you as the earth longs for rain, as the heart longs for its beloved." This was not just ritual or duty, it was a deep, personal yearning for union with the divine. For many, God was the perfect lover, faithful, eternal, forgiving, and always present. Many of the great saints and mystics of the Middle Ages wrote about their love for God in passionate, poetic terms. Saint Francis of Assisi saw the love of God in every creature. He called the sun his brother, the moon his sister, and treated the poor and sick with the tenderness of a mother. Saint Teresa of Avila described her spiritual journey as a mystical marriage, a union of soul and God so intense
that it brought both ecstasy and peace. In monasteries, monks and nuns lived together as a spiritual family, sharing meals, work and prayer. They wrote letters of encouragement, comforted each other in times of doubt, and celebrated together in times of joy. For those who married, faith was woven into every part of life. Marriage was not just a social contract, but a sacred covenant, a promise made before God and the community. In the church, the priest blessed the couple, reminding them that true love was sacrifice, patience, forgiveness, and mercy. The words spoken at the altar were not just for the couple, but for all who listened. Be to each other as Christ is to the church, with love that knows no limits and patience that never ends. When troubles came, illness, loss, or hardship, many couples turned to prayer, seeking strength and guidance. They believed that love, when rooted in faith, could survive any storm. Medieval poets and writers did not separate earthly love from spiritual longing. In the monasteries, some of the most beautiful poetry was written not for a human lover, but for God. O desire of my heart, O light of my eyes, I seek you in the silence of the night. I hear your whisper in the wind. I see your face in the moon's gentle glow. Even in popular tales, there were stories of saints and holy women who loved God so deeply that they gave up everything for him, or of lovers who found comfort in faith when separated by fate. Sacred love was not only about God, but also about the bonds between people, friendship, brotherhood and sisterhood in faith. In monasteries and convents, monks and nuns cared for each other as family. They nursed the sick, comforted the grieving, and celebrated together on holy days. Friendship was seen as a gift from God, a mirror for the soul, a companion on the journey to heaven. A true friend, they said, is a blessing from God, a fellow traveler on the road to paradise. In times of crisis, plague, famine, or war, sacred love often shone brightest. When the Black Death swept through Europe, many fled in fear, but some stayed. Nuns who cared for the dying, priests who comforted the sick, mothers who prayed for their children. In one village, when plague struck, a young nun named Agnes stayed behind to care for orphan children. She sang to them, told them stories of hope, and whispered prayers as they slept. God is with us, even in the darkness, she told them. Love never dies. The church offered confession as a way to seek forgiveness and begin again. People came to the priest with their secrets, their regrets, their longing for a new start. Can God forgive me? They would ask. Is there hope for someone like me? The answer, more often than not, was yes. God is love, and those who love are forgiven. Forgive others, and you will find peace. In the Middle Ages, people believed that love, whether for God or for others, could heal wounds, change hearts, and even work miracles. A woman who lost her husband in war found comfort in caring for the poor. A man who lost his child to plague built a chapel, praying for all who mourned. Every act of kindness, every word of comfort, every tear of forgiveness was seen as a reflection of divine love. In a distant convent, Sister Mary sat by her window, writing a letter to God. Lord, sometimes I feel alone. I long for a mother's embrace, a friend's gentle word. But I find you in every flower, in every child's smile, in every prayer I whisper at night. Teach me to love as you love, without fear, without end, without condition. She placed the letter in her prayer book and slept in peace, knowing her heart was never truly alone. Sacred love was not just for saints or monks. Even the simplest peasant, the tired mother, the wounded soldier found comfort in faith, in prayer, and in the love of family and friends. In winter nights, families gathered by the fire, singing hymns, telling stories, and giving thanks for the gift of love, no matter how humble or hard. Love in the Middle Ages was more than a story between two people. It was a journey of the soul, a search for meaning, a hope that reached beyond the world. In every prayer, every sacrifice, every act of forgiveness, there was love, a love that bound earth to heaven, people to God, and hearts to each other. Even in the darkest times, sacred love was a light that never went out, a strength that could not be broken, a hope that never died. In the grand tapestry of medieval life, love was not only the passion between lovers or the devotion to God, it was also the quiet, enduring strength of friendship, the laughter of companions, the loyalty of brothers in arms, and the comfort of sisterhood. Tonight, we step into the world of medieval friendships and human bonds, those relationships that shaped daily life, offered support in hardship, and gave meaning to the journey through a challenging age. In a world where life was often short and uncertain, friendship was a treasure beyond price. For peasants and nobles alike, friends were the ones who stood by you in times of need, who shared your burdens, and who celebrated your joys. In the village, neighbours were more than just people who lived nearby. They were the ones who helped repair your roof after a storm, who shared food in times of hunger, and who watched your children when you were sick. Friendship was woven into the fabric of daily life, at the well, in the fields, at the market, and around the fire. For nobles, friendship was both a personal bond and a political alliance. A lord might rely on his childhood friend to guard his secrets, support him in battle, or help him navigate the intrigues of court. Ladies in waiting formed close circles of trust, sharing laughter, advice, and sometimes even secrets of the heart. In monasteries and convents, monks and nuns lived as spiritual brothers and sisters. They prayed together, worked together, and cared for each other in sickness and in health. The rule of Saint Benedict, followed by many monastic communities, called for humility, obedience, and above all, love for one another. A monk might write in his journal, "Brother Thomas sat with me through the night as I battled fever. His prayers were a comfort, his presence a blessing. In this house of God I have found a family." For knights, brotherhood was forged in the heat of battle and the long nights of watch. The code of chivalry demanded loyalty, courage, and honour, not just to one's lord, but to one's fellow knights. A knight's squire was often his closest friend, sharing the dangers of war and the quiet moments of camp. Victories and defeats were shared, and the bonds formed on the battlefield could last a lifetime. In towns and cities, craftsmen and craftswomen formed guilds, associations that protected their members, set standards, and offered support in times of trouble. Women's guilds, though less common, provided a space for widows, spinners, and midwives to share knowledge, resources, and friendship. For many women, especially in villages, life was lived in the company of other women. They worked together, baking bread, spinning wool, tending gardens, and raising children. They shared stories, songs, and advice, and supported each other through childbirth, illness, and loss. The hearth was a place of warmth and safety, where women gathered to talk, laugh, and sometimes cry. Here, secrets were shared, worries eased, and friendships deepened. Midwives and healers were often at the center of women's networks. They brought new life into the world, comforted the dying, and passed on the wisdom of herbs and remedies. For noble women, letters were a lifeline. A woman might write to her sister in a distant castle, sharing news, seeking advice, or simply offering comfort in times of loneliness. In the fields and workshops, men worked side by side, sharing tools, stories, and sometimes dreams of a better life. They hunted together, built houses together, and defended their village from danger. The alehouse was a place for men to relax, share news, and forge friendships. Here, disputes could be settled, alliances formed, and laughter shared over a mug of ale. Not all male relationships were peaceful. Rivalries over land, love, or honor could lead to feuds, but the community often worked to bring about reconciliation through mediation, feasts, or even public apologies. While most friendships were formed within the same class or faith, there were always exceptions. A peasant and a noble might become friends through shared hardship or a common cause. A Christian and a Jew might work side by side in the market, learning to trust and respect each other despite the prejudices of the age. Pilgrimages to holy sites brought together people from all walks of life. On the road to Canterbury, Santiago, or Rome, strangers became companions, sharing food, stories, and prayers. Hospitality was a sacred duty. Travelers were welcomed into homes, offered food and shelter, and sometimes left as friends. Medieval literature is full of famous friendships: Roland and Oliver, Robin Hood and Little John, King Arthur and his knights. These stories celebrated loyalty, sacrifice, and the joy of shared adventure. Medieval proverbs often praised friendship. A friend in need is a friend indeed. Better a neighbor nearby than a brother far away. In love stories, the confidant, a loyal friend, a wise nurse, or a clever servant, was often the one who made romance possible, carrying messages, offering advice, and keeping secrets. Not all friendships lasted. Betrayal, envy, or simple change could end even the closest bond. A friend who revealed a secret, sided with a rival, or failed to help in time of need could become an enemy. The death of a friend was mourned deeply. Songs, prayers, and even monuments were created to honor the memory of a lost companion. Let's imagine a day in the life of two friends, Agnes, a weaver, and Joan, a baker's wife, in a medieval town. At dawn, Agnes brings a basket of cloth to Joan's shop. They share news of the market, laugh about their children's mischief, and trade a loaf of bread for a length of ribbon. Later, they work side by side at the well, helping each other carry water and sharing stories of their hopes and worries. When Joan's husband falls ill, Agnes brings soup and sits with her through the night. When Agnes's daughter is married, Joan bakes a special cake and helps prepare the feast. Their friendship weaves through every part of their lives, a source of strength, comfort, and joy. The story of friendship, brotherhood, and sisterhood in the Middle Ages is the story of every age. The comfort of a friend's voice in the darkness, the strength found in shared work and laughter, the hope that even in the hardest times we are not alone. Through all the changes of history, the human heart has always searched for connection, support, and the joy of belonging. In the Middle Ages, as today, love took many forms. It was the passion of lovers, the devotion of the faithful, the loyalty of friends, and the laughter of companions. These bonds gave meaning to life, helped people survive hardship, and made the joys of the world sweeter. As we look back on the lives of those who came before us, we remember not just their struggles, but their friendships, their kindness, and the many ways they found to love and care for each other.
As our long journey through the world of medieval love draws near its end, let us pause and look back, not just at the castles and cottages, the feasts and festivals, but at the hearts that beat beneath the surface of history. What remains of all those stories, rituals, and dreams? What can we learn from the loves and losses of people who lived so long ago? Tonight, we reflect on the legacy of medieval love, the lessons it left behind, the echoes that still shape our world, and the enduring dream of the human heart. The Middle Ages gave us some of the world's most powerful love stories, tales of passion and sacrifice, of longing and hope, of joy and heartbreak. These stories were told and retold, written in books, sung in ballads, painted on walls and whispered by the fire. Tristan and Isolde, Lancelot and Guinevere, Abelard and Heloise, their names still conjure images of forbidden love, secret meetings, and the price of desire. But beyond the legends, there were countless ordinary men and women whose stories were never written down, but whose hopes and fears were just as real. Why do these stories endure? Because they speak to something universal. The longing to be seen, to be loved, to find meaning in another's eyes. They remind us that love is both a gift and a risk, a source of strength and a cause of sorrow. Medieval lovers faced obstacles we can hardly imagine: wars, plagues, family feuds, and the iron rules of society. Yet again and again, they found ways to hope, to dream, and to reach for each other. Love, the Middle Ages teaches us, is not just a feeling. It is a choice, a commitment, a willingness to endure hardship and to forgive. In a world without privacy, the support or disapproval of family and neighbors could make or break a romance. Weddings were public, marriages were everyone's business, and the blessing of the community was a source of strength. Today, we may have more freedom, but we still need the support of friends, family, and community to help love grow. For many in the Middle Ages, faith was the foundation of love. Couples prayed together, sought the blessing of the church, and found comfort in the hope of reunion, if not in this life, then in the next. Even now, hope and faith, whether religious or simply the belief in a better tomorrow, help us endure the storms of the heart. The Middle Ages remind us that love is not just romance. It is friendship, loyalty, compassion, and the bonds between parents and children, neighbors and friends. The stories of brotherhood, sisterhood, and community are as important as the tales of passionate lovers. Jealousy, betrayal, and loss were as real then as they are now. But the Middle Ages also teach us the power of forgiveness, of starting again, of healing wounds, of finding peace after pain. Many of our wedding traditions, rings, vows, feasts, and the blessing of family have roots in the Middle Ages. The idea of marriage as a partnership, a journey, and a sacred promise still shapes our lives. The ballads and legends of medieval love continue to inspire novels, movies, and music. We still tell stories of star-crossed lovers, of knights and ladies, of hope and heartbreak. The language of flowers, the giving of rings, the exchange of love letters, all these traditions have medieval origins. Perhaps most of all, the Middle Ages remind us that love is a search for meaning, a way to make sense of the world, to find comfort in the face of loss, and to celebrate the beauty of being alive. If a medieval lover could see our world, what would they think? They might marvel at our freedom, the ability to choose our partners, to love across boundaries of class, faith, or distance. They might envy our privacy, our technology, our ability to stay connected across oceans and continents. But they might also wonder if we have lost something: the sense of community,
the depth of commitment, the willingness to endure hardship for the sake of love. They might remind us that love is not always easy, that it requires patience, sacrifice, and the courage to hope. Let's imagine a modern story inspired by the lessons of the Middle Ages. Anna and David meet at university, drawn together by a shared love of history and music. They fall in love, but face challenges, distance, family expectations, the pressures of work and study. On their wedding day, they choose to read a poem from the Middle Ages, a reminder that love is both ancient and new. Though the world may change, the heart remains the same. In joy and in sorrow, in hope and in fear, I choose you as lovers have chosen for 1,000 years. Their story is not so different from those who came before, a story of longing, of hope, of the dream that love can endure. Why do we return again and again to the stories of medieval love? Because they remind us that we are not alone, that others have faced the same fears, the same hopes, the same longing for connection. Because they teach us that love is worth the risk, that even in the face of loss, betrayal, or hardship, the heart can heal, can hope, can dream again. Because they inspire us to be brave, to reach out, to forgive, to believe in the possibility of joy. As our journey through the world of medieval love comes to a close, let us carry its lessons with us. To cherish the ones we love, to forgive, to hope, to endure, to find beauty in the ordinary and meaning in the bonds we share. The Middle Ages may be gone, but the dream of love endures. A light that never dies, a song that never ends, a hope that lives in every heart. Thank you for joining me on this gentle journey through time. May your own story be filled with love, with friendship, and with the courage to dream. Good night.